The journal Science has called this crop a war plant of the first order. The United States Department of Agriculture has said when war and famine lay heavy hands on humanity, the question has always been raised, why is more of this plant not grown? Hey everybody, Chad Cruiser here with Health and Homestead. So if times got difficult, this particular plant behind me could be one of the easiest plants you could possibly grow. And this is one of the most prolific plants that has one of the highest yields of all plants. This is none other than the Jerusalem artichoke. Now, it's not an artichoke like you've normally had, and it's not from Jerusalem either. This is a plant that is a tuber. It's a beautiful plant to grow. Could this be one of the most important foods to sustain your family in difficult times? I'm going to tell you the kind of good, bad, and the ugly of this plant. And one of the reasons why it's such a great plant is because, well, you have these, they become very beautiful with these nice flowers. They're in the sunflower family, but you don't eat the seeds like you would with a sunflower. Instead, you eat the tubers. And so this is something that historically, they say that an army marches on its stomach and they have to have food. And typically the way it would be, they would march through a region and they would take all the food that was there. But something like Jerusalem artichoke, if you hacked these down right now, the tubers can stay in the ground basically through the winter. And so you could have them in the ground. It's something that is very easy to just keep in the ground. Now, taking them in your house, they don't last that long, but if you leave them out, you can dig them up at any time you want. And so this is something as the soldiers were marching through, you could simply cut down the plants, nobody would really know, and you would still have a massive yield of food stored in the ground with almost no labor. But I want to start with a little bit of history about it because many of you probably never even heard of it. Well, the first time it was ever mentioned was by Samuel de Champlain back in the 1600s, and he was making his way through a meadow viewing the food of the Native Americans, and he wrote that he saw an abundance of Brazilian beans, many edible squashes of various sizes, tobacco and roots which they cultivate, the latter having the taste of artichokes. And that's one of the reasons these are called Jerusalem artichokes, not because it is an artichoke, it's not, but because the root may have somewhat the taste of an artichoke. It's actually believed that during the first Thanksgiving that took place here in the Americas, you had things like squash, you had beans, and you probably also had the Jerusalem artichoke, the tuber, the root that comes from this plant. The Huron Native American tribe specifically ate the Jerusalem artichoke. In New England, it was historically eaten as a pottage, which is a thick stew. And it can be eaten raw, steamed, roasted, caramelized, or boiled, made into something like a flour or possibly roasted for a coffee substitute. And I can tell you, don't microwave it. Some of you may not want to use microwaves at all, but I actually tried and it almost disappears. It's the strangest things, it just kind of disintegrates. So it's not made for microwaving. Though native to North America, they are now on every continent on the planet excluding Antarctica. From Arkansas to Albania, from Tunisia to Tasmania. One of the unusual things about it is it's eaten more in other countries than the United States, yet it's actually indigenous to this part of the world. It wasn't indigenous to other places on planet Earth, but they've grown to use it more, and most of us don't even know what it is. The Jerusalem artichoke was brought to Europe before the potato. As the potato arrived, the importance of the Jerusalem artichoke faded. And many people think of things like the potato as, the Irish potato. Well, the Irish had never heard of the potato before the explorers came to South America, ended up finding the potato in the South Americans originally from places like the Andes. Even before they found that, they had found the Jerusalem artichoke. They had taken that back to Europe and it had become somewhat of a successful plant for a time in Europe. After the 30 Years' War of Central Europe that killed 20% of the German population, many of those who survived in the region of Thuringia subsisted almost solely on Jerusalem artichokes. And of all cultivated crops, the Jerusalem artichoke has the second highest yield per acre after corn. Now, these are standard crops. There are certain other things that people don't normally eat that have even higher yield, but of all standard cultivated crops, this is number 2 when it comes to yield, and it's so much easier to grow. And you say, but yeah, where am I going to get my protein? Well, the protein in Jerusalem artichokes has all the essential amino acids in the necessary proportions. So this is something like a potato, whereas people have lived and subsisted almost solely on potatoes at times during human history. And the Jerusalem artichoke is evidently a plant where, at least protein-wise, now you would want to mix some other things in with it for sure. I'm actually gonna have a long-form video where I'm gonna go through some of the details on this, but suffice it to say, this is a great staple crop if someone had to survive. And these may be one of the easiest things to grow. Speaking of the Jerusalem artichoke, the Encyclopedia Americana said, perhaps no other plant is of easier cultivation. They typically grow better in the cooler regions of the world, and disease may show up in the hotter regions. They can generally be grown in zones 2, that's a very cold regions, maybe 2 or 3, all the way up to zone 9. And it's also a food for good gut bacteria. Inulin, the carbohydrate found in Jerusalem artichokes, is undigestible to humans, but we have something in us that can metabolize them, and that is our good gut bacteria. It turns out that those who consume Jerusalem artichokes have bifidobacteria that takes the place of some of the bacteria in their gut, and this genus of bacteria is considered to be beneficial for our health. Now, one of the negatives about it is that it can be what some of the explorers refer to as windy. Now, today we would call them maybe gassy. And for some people, it causes severe gas. For other people, it doesn't. I actually have a friend who, by consuming Jerusalem artichokes, she actually has better digestion. So some people actually do better with their digestion with Jerusalem artichoke, but other people have gas. The only way you're gonna know for sure is if you actually try it out for yourself. Dean Shoemaker with the United States Department of Agriculture said it will give a better account of itself in poorer soils than will other root and tuber crops, meaning they'll actually grow more. It is called in France the poor man's soil beet, and is largely planted in soils which would return little in potatoes and nothing at all in beets. Short says, the Lord in his bounty has not forgotten poor sandy soils, for he gave them the Jerusalem artichoke and the spergula. One decided advantage of sandy soil is that the tubers do not carry so much adhering earth at harvest time. I have very, very sandy soil, and you look at these things, they look like, I mean, you think I have great soil with these like 8-foot plants growing around me, and you can get a great harvest in very poor soil. M. Rao compared the Jerusalem artichoke with the potato on the basis of German experience and decided that the former, Jerusalem artichoke, was superior as a forage crop as it requires less labor to plant and cultivate, yields more heavily in tubers and straw, is of higher food value, and the tubers have greater frost resistance. Now, comparing it to the potato, there are 345 calories per pound in the Jerusalem artichoke, similar to potatoes having 347 per pound. The average yield is about 12 to 15 million calories per acre, but it can get as high as 16.5 million per acre. Now, corn can also get like 15 million calories per acre, but the difficulty with corn is that it's a heavy feeder, meaning it needs a lot of nitrogen, and for those who don't have the best soil, corn can actually be difficult to grow, but this, being that it can grow even in poor soil, is something that you can get the same yield as corn, but without all the input to the soil. And it does well in most soils, excluding soils that are quite wet. One of the difficult things about Jerusalem artichoke is once you plant them, it's hard to get rid of them. So don't plant them right in your garden. Put them in an area that you don't mind just being overtaken with the Jerusalem artichoke. Now, you can get rid of them, but it's more difficult. And so put them in an area you don't mind just getting taken over. In general, pests do not cause significant damage to Jerusalem artichoke, which is fantastic. Now, deer will eat them, so you're gonna have to protect them from them. And once again, potato versus the Jerusalem artichoke. In order to replant potatoes, you need to save about 1,600 pounds of seed potatoes for each acre. In order to replant Jerusalem artichoke, all you have to do is leave 1.5 to 2 ounce tuber in the ground when you harvest them, and these tubers will grow the next spring. And chances are you'll not be able to remove all the tubers anyway, and they will grow back by default. So these are super easy to grow. Potatoes in general store better in cold storage, but many varieties of Jerusalem artichoke can stay all winter in the ground and stay great until spring. In general, the nutrition is comparable for both Jerusalem artichokes and potatoes. Okay, since they're gassy, what are some things that you can do about the gas? Number one, leaving them in the ground until a good frost comes can make them less gassy potentially, or you can even freeze some, and then after thawing them out, they may be less gassy at that point. A second thing you could do is boil them for a long period, dump off the water and boil them again. And we're told that the Native Americans, one of the things that they would do is they would roast them by some coals for a long time period, and that may have made it easier to digest. Another thing that can help with the potential indigestion is cooking them with lemon juice. If you're someone like me, you love history, you love learning about things, this is a plant you probably know very little about. I probably studied this out more than most humans on planet Earth because it just fascinates me, and I love history, I love science. I'm gonna have a long form video, like probably close to an hour, on the Jerusalem artichoke for those who like a nerdy deep dive into something that you know almost nothing about. So you can check that out on our Patreon page. I'll have a link down below. If you like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification. God bless and have a fantastic day.